All right, I'm so happy to have with me in the Student Pilot Cast today your old friend Kent Shook from the Pilot Cast days. Hey, Kent, how you doing?
Great. Really glad to be here.
Awesome. So Kent and I at Oshkosh, as you do, talk about ideas and things about aviation that you've been thinking about. And one of the things we started talking about are these tips beyond the check ride. So when you get into your regular flying, how you really weren't taught some basic things that you might need to know as you get out in the world and do real cross countries and do real flying with friends and family. So we're going to kick this segment off. Our first one is going to be about flying with non-pilot passengers. It's the first thing you want to do most of the time when you first get your ticket. Who was your first passenger, Kent?
I'd have to go and look. It's been so long, I cannot remember. Maybe I should have looked for that before we started doing this segment. But, really my first passenger was my primary CFI because the first thing that I did after my check ride, which I did all my flight training in Cessnas, and I wanted to have the best possibility of being able to rent an airplane whenever. And so the very first flight after my check ride was going to get checked out in the Cherokees. So maybe I'll try and look at my logbook quick before we're done here and see who it was. But yeah, I've flown a whole lot of people over the years for the first time. And I mean, I think that's a thing that almost every pilot wants to do just about right away after their check ride, right? You've been sitting here with your instructor for so long, and probably spouses are a frequent first flight passenger because they want to know where all this money's going. um, so it's a thing that I think everybody does at some point, but nobody ever really talks about what to do. And this segment is all about experience, right? And so I'm going to tell you a few things that I've done wrong and a few things that I've hopefully done right, but we want everybody to have the best experience possible, especially those spouses, because spousal support is extremely important if you want to keep flying.
No question about it.
So who was your first passenger, Bill?
My first passenger was my wife. That's right. And
Hey,
and
there you
I
go.
do have a little story along these lines. I was trying to be the most conscientious pilot of a new non-pilot passenger ever. Obviously, I wanted it to be a great experience for her. And so I was explaining everything I was doing in the pre-flight. I did a great passenger briefing. I was in the mode because I'd just done my check ride. And I made sure I was saying, in the very unlikely event that we do have to land off airport, here are some things to think about. I was being really conscientious. And I was telling her, okay, this is what you can expect. This is what we're going to be doing. Of course, I wasn't following all of the best guidelines. It was summer in Phoenix, after all, and we were going to go take a flight up to the high country. I was on the upwind, basically. I had taken off and I was flying straight out. I was cleared to make a right crosswind departure to the north. And again, I was explaining everything that was going to happen. And as soon as I banked right to make my right crosswind departure, I heard a little scream. So even with all of my thinking and pre-planning and making sure she was comfortable and she was expecting everything, I didn't prep her that she was going to feel the banks a little more in this small airplane than maybe she does in a commercial jetliner. So that was my one tip I want to add here, especially to a new passenger who's never been in a small airplane before. You're going to feel things more, and it's probably good to kind of explain that. And maybe even before your first banks, just say, hey, I'm about to turn right. And I wish I would have done that. She was fine. She got used to it really quick, and we had a great weekend trip, and it all worked out right. She loves flying with me. She's not scared of any of it. So everything worked out perfectly. But she did let out a little yelp when I first put her down towards the ground on the right side of the airplane when I made that right turn. So something to be
Yeah,
thinking
well, and
about.
that's actually, that brings up kind of the first bullet on my list here, which is to always explain everything that you're doing. Which, if you're a new pilot, hopefully your flight instructor prepared you and coached you to do that during the check ride as well, because, the examiner wants to know what you're thinking as well. So hopefully you're in practice when it comes to what you're going to be talking about throughout the flight. I mean, really, for your passengers, it's all about comfort. So think about what you're saying. Tell them what you're doing. I mean, even something as simple as a run-up will confuse somebody who's never been in a small airplane before. So, hey, we're just going to check a couple things on the engine. We'll rev it up here, but we're not going to go anywhere yet, and that sort of thing. Plane might bounce around a little bit from the prop wash and that sort of thing. I can definitely tell you that what you don't want to do is right after takeoff, when you realize you forgot to turn your transponder to altitude from standby before takeoff, you really shouldn't say, oh,
Or, oops.
because that's a very inconsequential thing. But
or, uh-oh.
yeah, that's one of the things I did early on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yep, that was one of my things that I did early on that was not a great idea. So going along with kind of keeping them in the loop as to what's going to happen, you also want to fly really, really smooth. For some reason, a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm a pilot now, and they feel the need to either show off or show their passenger every maneuver they had to learn to get their pilot certificate.
Yeah, don't do stalls, right? Don't do stalls with a new passenger.
Exactly. And, my first ride in a GA plane was with my uncle, and I loved it. But I do remember he stalled the plane a few times, and, he was showing me all those things, and I was fine in the airplane. I ended up getting sick when we got back on the ground. Later on, so it might not have had anything to do with the flight. But yeah, that's a thing that I have done that with some people, but only people who were actually interested in learning how to fly and, in fact, were concerned about what stalls were going to be like. And that guy went, oh, that's all it is? But yeah, if he had not been a person who was interested in learning how to fly and already had some concerns about stalls and wanted to see a stall, then yeah, that's definitely a thing that you don't want to do. Along with that, you'll sense there's this comfort theme throughout everything that we say here. Try and fly when there's as little turbulence as possible. I don't know what causes the most turbulence down in your area, but up here you get a lot of turbulence in the spring and fall because you have when you get the solar heating on the ground from the sun, the ground is starting out really cold in the spring, and so the temperature difference between the light areas and the dark areas is pretty extreme. And then as you're into summer, or if you're in the middle of winter, there's very little thermal activity. Time of day makes a difference, though, with that. Of course, late afternoon or mid-afternoon as well are both going to be really turbulent most of the time. Yep. If surface winds are really, really strong, you'll get some mechanical turbulence and that sort of thing. So do your best to go up at a time where you're not going to have as much turbulence. One thing that I really like to do, if they're someone that I think is really going to be into it and doesn't have any motion sickness issues to worry about or anything like that, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take them for a $100 hamburger and we'll fly somewhere in the evening as the sun is going down and then, eat some food and then fly back at night so that they can experience that as well.
That flight at night is usually very smooth.
Yes.
Yep. Out here in the desert, we get a lot of lifting action in the summer and the spring and the fall because it's still hot at those times as well. So we get a lot of that. And then, of course, out here in the west where we have lots of mountains, we get a lot of mechanical turbulence from wind as well. So, yeah, it's a good thing to think about. Go when turbulence is lighter. Speaking of that, one of the things that ForeFlight's been working a lot on is being able to see actual turbulence based on people using their sentries, and the ADHARs that are part of that are giving a lot of data back to ForeFlight. And so that might be a tool to help you choose a time and a day that's maybe a little lighter on the turbulence. So something to think about just popped into
Yeah.
my head.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's one of the newest features of ForeFlight, the actual reported turbulence,
Hmm.
and they're, I guess, using something specific about the sensor package that they have in the Sentry to be able to detect turbulence. And if you sign up with ForeFlight to submit the data from your Sentry at the end of a flight, then you get that feature for free, and the rest of us have to pay for it. But that's, I mean, I'm kind of excited to see where things go with that
Yeah.
feature. I haven't pulled it up recently, but I hope that there's lots of people signing up to do that and giving us lots of data so that feature becomes really useful, because that is really a great tool that we have not had anywhere in aviation
Yeah.
before. So,
Automatic and real PyReps without you having to do PyReps. Yeah, it's great.
yeah.
What else? What else can you think of that,
Well,
people should be thinking about when they take their first passengers?
well, I do have to say I was just looking, and my first flight was my best friend as well as someone else that I knew, and I did exactly the wrong thing with what we were talking about. It was a late afternoon flight at the end of May in Wisconsin, and it was really, really bumpy. You know, even 20 years later, that was some of the worst turbulence I've
Oh my
had.
gosh.
Um,
Great first flight.
yeah, and you were mentioning mountains in the Southwest. I think the worst turbulence I've had, at least in terms of being more than just one bump, an extended period of turbulence, was flying west out of Albuquerque.
Hmm.
So, yeah. Anyway, that friend, uh, I know he's flown with me at least one more time, but he's not super eager to go with me. So that, may be
Yeah,
why.
you can't definitely attribute it to
um,
that, I guess, but it certainly didn't help, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I guess you should be prepared with barf bags and all that kind of
Good
stuff.
point.
You can just use a Ziploc if you don't have the,
Hmm.
special airplane ones. But once in a while, people will steal barf bags off an airline flight
Yeah.
and give them to me so I
They've
have them
got
on the
stacks of
plane.
them.
But
You can just ask for them.
yeah, I've actually only ever had one person who had an issue with that I was flying. Well, I guess two. Once in Part 91 personal flying and once in professional flying. Um, the second one had just had his COVID vaccine, and he got the, was it Johnson & Johnson that was making
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
sick, and so he was actually getting sick before he even got to the airplane for us to fly him home. So that one definitely wasn't my fault. But
So tell
um,
me a couple of reasons that you've thought about that it's so important to make your passengers comfortable.
well, we mentioned one already, which is that you want them to come fly with you again, right?
Yeah.
But the other one is, I used to train truck drivers, and I used to always take my trainees flying at some point. Usually, when they were getting successful with things, that was kind of the reward of, hey, I think we're almost done and going to get you in your own truck. Hey, do you want to go flying? And one of them that I specifically remember, his brother had been a cargo pilot
Mm.
and had taken him flying in a 310 and was just making jokes about, gee, I hope our wing doesn't fall
Yeah.
off and stuff like that. And, was just purposely trying to freak him out
Yeah.
because, I guess that's what brothers do
Right. Right.
sometimes. But, you know,
It's that or a noogie. So
right, right.
yeah.
But yeah, he never got on an airplane again, and he wouldn't go flying with me, and I'm not even sure he flies on the airlines anymore. You know, GA is just a very, very, very small community, but we do need to make friends with the rest of the world because their taxes pay for our airports in a lot of cases. And so, next time your local airport is in trouble, you don't want that person whose brother freaked them out and they never went flying again to be speaking up at the town meeting and saying, screw those guys, let's get rid of all those dumb little airplanes, right?
Yeah.
You want to have a bunch of people that you've taken flying and given a wonderful experience, and hopefully you've taken their kids flying, maybe in Young Eagles, and um, maybe you've brought them a puppy with pilots and paws or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Show people the good side of aviation, and
They'll pay it
if they
back, right?
are going up with
Yep.
you, absolutely
Yep.
we need more friends of this industry.
For sure.
So that's
Yeah.
incredibly important.
Yeah. So if I could sum it up, one, don't freak out your passengers. Find ways to not freak them out or make them sick. And two, let's make friends outside of aviation, right?
Absolutely.
We want all the non-pilots to like the airplanes and like flying with us. It gives us more opportunities to fly if they want to fly with us, right? So that's part of
Yep.
our challenge.
Yep, just make it smooth and comfortable and fun. And the fact that you're a pilot is the coolest thing in the world to them.
Yeah,
There's nothing else you need to show off,
that is a really good point. Yeah, that is a really good point. Well, Kent, this was super fun to reprise our roles on the Pilot Cast a little bit and get back together. So appreciate you coming
Absolutely.
on. And I'll say to the SPC listeners that we're going to be doing more of this, and we're going to do a new topic for a lot of episodes. So this feature will hopefully keep going, and we'll hear a lot more from Kent and the wisdom of all of the experience that he has. So appreciate you coming on, Kent. It was really fun.
Well, and I hope people will write back in and offer their comments and maybe give us some ideas of things to talk about on this because, I've been flying these little airplanes for 20 plus years now, and I still definitely don't know it all. So
Yep.
tell us what you want to hear, and we'll talk about it.